Why One Piece is so good. There are a lot of long-running anime and manga series. Some have better animation, some have darker fights, some move faster. Some are easier to recommend because they don't ask you to watch hundreds of episodes before you understand the full shape of the journey. But One Piece has something very rare. It doesn't just tell you a story, it makes you feel like you're leaving home. That's the real reason One Piece is so good. It isn't only the powers, the pirates, the fights, or the mysteries. Those things matter, but they aren't the heart of it. The heart of One Piece is that every island feels like a new chapter in a dream, and every dream belongs to someone who has been hurt, trapped, laughed at, or told they aren't allowed to want more. Then, Luffy arrives. And suddenly the question isn't, can he beat the villain? The question is, what does freedom look like for this person? That's why One Piece stays with people. It makes adventure feel emotional. On the surface, One Piece is incredibly simple. A boy with a straw hat wants to become king of the pirates. He gathers a crew, sails from island to island, fights stronger enemies, and gets closer to a legendary treasure. That sounds like a normal adventure story, but the genius is in how that simple goal creates room for almost anything. One island can be a desert kingdom being torn apart by conspiracy. Another can be a sky island hidden above the clouds. Another can be a haunted sea full of shadows. Another can be a city of shipwrights, a prison, a battlefield, a kingdom under tyranny, or a place where history itself has been buried. That matters, because a lot of stories make the world feel like it exists only for the main character. One Piece does the opposite. Luffy often walks into problems that were already happening long before he got there. People have already suffered. Nations have already been manipulated. Families have already been broken. Dreams have already been crushed. Luffy doesn't create the meaning of the world. He crashes into it. And because he's so direct, so stubborn, and so emotionally honest, he becomes the spark that lets other people finally act. He isn't a traditional savior who stands above everyone. He's more like a storm that reminds people they were allowed to breathe in the first place. That's why the adventure works. Every island isn't just a location, it's a pressure cooker. And by the time the fight begins, we aren't only waiting to see who wins, we're waiting to see a whole place exhale. The Straw Hats are one of the strongest parts of One Piece because each of them is built around a dream. But none of those dreams feel shallow. Zoro doesn't just want to be the greatest swordsman because it sounds cool. His dream is tied to a promise, to grief, to discipline, and to the idea that strength means carrying someone else's will forward. Nami doesn't just want to draw maps. Her dream is tied to survival, control, and reclaiming a childhood that was stolen by fear. Sanji doesn't just want to find the All Blue. His dream is tied to hunger, kindness, and the belief that feeding someone can be a form of love. Usopp doesn't just want to become brave. His dream is painful because bravery doesn't come naturally to him. He's scared all the time, and that's exactly why his courage matters. Robin doesn't just want to learn history. Her dream is tied to loneliness, genocide, and the right to exist after the world tells her she shouldn't. This is the pattern. One Piece takes dreams that could sound silly or simple, then gives them emotional weight. That's why the crew feels so alive. They aren't just a team of fighters. They're a collection of wounded hopes. They laugh, argue, eat, panic, mess around, and act ridiculous. But underneath all of that's this beautiful idea. Every person on the ship is moving toward a future they were almost denied. Luffy's greatest power isn't rubber. It's that he treats those dreams as obvious. He doesn't need a long explanation for why someone's dream matters. If it matters to them, that's enough. That makes the Straw Hats feel like a found family in the strongest sense. They aren't together because they've the same personality or the same past. They're together because, for the first time, each of them is surrounded by people who won't laugh at the thing they want most. Luffy works because he isn't complicated in the usual way. He isn't secretly plotting 10 moves ahead. He isn't morally gray in a heavy, tortured sense. He doesn't spend every arc questioning whether freedom is worth fighting for. That could make a character boring, but with Luffy, it does the opposite. His simplicity becomes a mirror. When he meets people who are trapped in complicated systems, he cuts through the noise. He doesn't care about the political excuse, the social excuse, the bloodline excuse, the authority excuse, or the historical excuse. If someone is hurting his friend, he understands the situation clearly enough. That's powerful, because the world of One Piece is full of people trying to make cruelty sound normal. Kings do it, pirates do it, marines do it, nobles do it, governments do it. Villains constantly explain why the weak should stay weak. why history should stay buried, why certain people don't deserve freedom, or why suffering is simply the way the world works. Luffy rejects all of that without turning it into a speech. He's funny, selfish, reckless, and often absurd. But when the emotional truth of an arc appears, he's usually the first person to understand it. Not intellectually, instinctively. That's why he's such a strong main character. He doesn't change the world by becoming more cynical. He changes the world by refusing to let cynicism become wisdom. One Piece is famous for long setup, and this is where the series becomes almost unfair to other stories. A detail that seems like a joke can matter hundreds of chapters later. A side character can return with new emotional weight. A strange island can connect to a larger history. A symbol, a name, a promise, or a tiny piece of dialogue can suddenly become important years after you first saw it. When you watch One Piece for long enough, you start believing that the story remembers. It remembers pain. It remembers promises. It remembers places. It remembers people who looked like side characters, but were actually carrying something important. This makes the world feel alive in a way that's hard to fake. The story doesn't feel like a straight road. It feels like an ocean. You sail forward, but the waves behind you still matter. And because One Piece is so long, its emotional payoffs can hit with a different kind of force. When a character finally says what they need, when a crew member finally asks for help, when a country finally breaks free, or when a mystery finally opens up, it lands because the story made you live with the weight first. That patience is one of the reasons the series is so beloved. One Piece doesn't always rush to give you the answer. It lets you care first. The world of One Piece isn't just big, it has an argument inside it. Almost everywhere the crew goes, there is some version of control. Someone is controlling history. Someone is controlling movement. Someone is controlling food, money, race, information, law, or fear. The villains are often powerful because they've convinced people that the cage is permanent. That's why freedom isn't just a theme in One Piece. Pirates in this story aren't automatically good. Marines aren't automatically bad. The series is more interesting than that. What matters is whether a person protects freedom or crushes it. A pirate can be a monster. A Marine can be honorable. A king can be kind. A government can be terrifying. A criminal can be more human than the people calling him one. That moral flexibility gives the world depth. It also makes Luffy's dream feel larger than a title. Becoming king of the pirates isn't about ruling everyone. For Luffy, it means being the freest person on the sea. That's such a clean idea. But the longer the story goes, the more powerful it becomes. Because in a world built on hidden history, inherited pain, and people being told where they belong, the freest person alive becomes a threat just by existing. That's why the stakes keep growing naturally. The story starts with a boy in a barrel, but the dream was always big enough to shake the world. Another reason One Piece works so well is that it isn't afraid to be ridiculous. Characters make stupid faces. Fights can be bizarre. Powers can sound absurd. Islands can be built around ideas that shouldn't work. A serious scene might sit right next to a joke that feels completely childish. And somehow that makes the pain hit harder, because One Piece understands that people aren't only one thing. The same crew that cries over a friend can also fight over food. The same character who carries trauma can still be funny. The same world that contains slavery, war, and corruption can also contain dancing, bad disguises, weird animals, and people chasing impossible dreams with their whole chest. That mix gives the story warmth. If One Piece were only dark, it'd lose the feeling of adventure. If it were only silly, the emotional moments wouldn't land. But because it allows both, the world feels human. Joy isn't treated like a distraction from suffering. Joy is one of the reasons suffering should be fought in the first place. That's a huge part of the series' identity. The laughter matters. The parties matter. The stupid little crew moments matter. They remind you what freedom is supposed to feel like. So why is One Piece so good? It's good because the world feels endless, but the emotions feel personal. It's good because the fights aren't just about winning. They're about freeing someone from a lie they were forced to live inside. It's good because the crew is built from dreams that could have died, but didn't. It's good because Luffy is simple in a world that keeps trying to make cruelty complicated. It's good because the story remembers its own heart. And maybe most of all, it's good because it makes people believe in impossible journeys. Not in a cheesy way, in a strangely sincere way. One Piece looks at a world full of cages and says, what if the sea is still open? What if your dream isn't stupid? What if the people who laugh at you are wrong? What if freedom is worth chasing, even when the whole world tells you to sit down? That's why the series lasts. Not just because people want to know what the One Piece is, of course they do. The mystery matters, the final island matters, the treasure matters. But the reason people stay is because the journey has already given them something. It gives them a crew. It gives them a world that feels bigger than their fear. And it gives them a simple, stubborn, beautiful idea. No matter how impossible your dream looks from the shore, you're still allowed to set sail. That's what makes One Piece special to me. But I want to know what makes it special to you. Is it the crew, the world building, the emotional backstories, the mysteries, the comedy, or just that feeling of adventure no other series quite captures? Tell me the exact moment One Piece became great for you.